The invitation had been hand-delivered by my sister Elena 3 weeks ago. Cream cardstock with delicate pink roses embossed in the corners, my name written in her perfect calligraphy. She'd planned everything, she'd informed me. The venue, the guest list, the menu, even the games we'd play. All I had to do was show up. "I know you're busy with work and everything," she'd said, sitting in my small living room and barely hiding her distaste for my modest furniture. "So I took care of all the details. That's what big sisters are for, right?" By work, she meant my freelance graphic design business that I ran from home. At least that's what I'd told my family years ago when they'd asked what I did for a living. It was simpler that way. Easier than explaining the truth to people who wouldn't understand or believe it anyway. Now, at 8 months pregnant, I sat in the private dining room of Lucia's, the upscale Italian restaurant where my family celebrated every important occasion, surrounded by 35 women who'd known me my entire life. Women who thought they knew everything about me. My mother sat to my right, Elena to my left, both playing their roles perfectly. The concerned mother and the protective older sister, united in their mission to save me from myself. "Open this one next," my Aunt Rosa said, sliding a wrapped box across the table. Inside was a baby monitor, clearly used but still functional. "I kept this from when my grandson was born 5 years ago. Works perfectly fine. No sense spending money on new when you can't really afford it." "Thank you, Tia," I said, genuinely meaning it. "That's very thoughtful." "Practical is what you need," my mother interjected, nodding approvingly. "Not expensive new things that you'll just worry about breaking or losing. Practical, sturdy items that get the job done." I carefully folded the tissue paper and reached for the next gift, feeling the weight of their collective pity pressing down on me like a physical thing. The shower continued in this vein, well-intentioned gifts that were either second-hand clearance finds, or accompanied by apologetic explanations about my presumed financial limitations. A bouncer my cousin's children had used. A diaper bag with a broken zipper that could easily be fixed with a safety pin. A breast pump that was only missing a few minor parts, that could be ordered online. "The important thing is that it still works," my cousin Mariana assured me as I unwrapped the incomplete pump. "My sister-in-law used this for all 3 of her babies. Your baby won't know it's not brand new." "I really appreciate everyone thinking of me," I said, and I meant it. These women were genuinely trying to help in the only way they knew how. They'd decided I was struggling financially, and they were rallying around me with the resources they could spare. It wasn't malicious. It was actually kind in its own misguided way. What they didn't know, what I'd never told them, was that their assumptions were built on a foundation of misunderstandings I'd never bothered to correct. It had been easier over the years to let them believe what they wanted to believe. Easier than dealing with the complicated dynamics that money brought to family relationships. Easier than watching people change once they knew the truth. Elena stood up after the last gift was opened, tapping her wine glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. Her diamond bracelet, a gift from her husband Marco for their 5th anniversary, caught the light as she moved. She was wearing a designer dress that she'd probably spent a month's salary on, her hair professionally styled, her makeup perfect. Everything about Elena screamed success. And everything about the narrative she'd built around me screamed the opposite. "Before we have dessert," Elena began, her voice carrying that particular tone of affectionate concern that she'd perfected over the years, "I want to say a few words about my baby sister." I braced myself, my hand instinctively moving to rest on my rounded belly. "Sophia has always been fiercely independent," Elena continued, smiling at me in a way that looked warm but felt condescending. "Even as a little girl, she insisted on doing everything herself. Tying her own shoes, making her own lunch, figuring out her own homework. She never wanted help from anyone. She was stubborn that way." Several women at the table nodded knowingly, smiling at me with that mixture of admiration and pity that I'd grown accustomed to. "And that independence has carried into adulthood," Elena went on. "Sophia has always gone her own way, made her own choices, refused to follow the traditional path. Which is admirable, really. She's never cared what anyone else thought. She's just done her own thing." I could hear the "but" coming from a mile away. "But," Elena said right on cue, "independence is one thing when you're only responsible for yourself. It's another thing entirely when you're about to become a mother." The room shifted, everyone leaning in slightly. This was what they'd been waiting for, the intervention disguised as a celebration. Sophia is about to have a baby, Elena continued, her voice growing more serious. Which is wonderful. We're all thrilled for her. But I think, and I know Mom agrees with me, that we need to have an honest conversation about the reality of this situation. My mother nodded vigorously, her eyes already glistening with tears. Sophia is 34 years old, Elena said, ticking off points on her perfectly manicured fingers. She's single. She works from home doing freelance graphic design, which is fine, but it's not exactly stable income. She lives in a tiny studio apartment in Queens. And while I love my sister dearly, I think we all need to acknowledge that she's not in the most secure position to be raising a child alone. Elena, I started, but she held up a hand. Please let me finish. This is important. She turned to address the room. I've done research. The average cost of raising a child in New York City for just the first year is around $15,000. That's diapers, formula, clothes, medical expenses, just the basics. It doesn't include childcare, which in Queens averages $1,500 per month if you need to work. She pulled out her phone, actually having prepared a presentation. That's $33,000 for the first year alone. And I know, she looked at me directly now, that Sophia makes nowhere near that amount with her freelance work. The room was silent. Every eye was on me. You live in a studio apartment, Elena said, her voice rising with emotion. How will you afford a baby? My mother jumped in before I could respond. She can barely pay her bills, she said, her voice breaking. Last Christmas, Sophia said she was being careful with money. At Easter she didn't come to dinner because she claimed she had a work deadline, but I really think she couldn't afford the hostess gift. We're not trying to embarrass you, Mija. We're trying to help. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I'd skipped Easter dinner because I'd been in Dubai meeting with a client about a $3 million contract? That being careful with money meant I was restructuring my investment portfolio to be more conservative before the baby arrived? That my tiny studio apartment in Queens was a deliberate choice, not a financial necessity? They wouldn't believe me. Worse, they wouldn't understand. And the moment I explained the truth, everything would change. The dynamic we'd maintained for years would shatter, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But apparently I was about to find out. We've been talking, Elena continued, glancing at my mother for support, and we think the best solution is for you to move in with one of us. At least for the first year or two until you get on your feet. Get on my feet? I repeated quietly. Until the baby is a bit older and you can go back to work properly, my mother clarified. Elena and Marco have that beautiful spare room. Or you could stay with me. I'm retired now, so I could help with childcare while you work. You wouldn't have to pay rent, you could save money, and the baby would have more space than that tiny apartment. It's really the most practical solution, Elena agreed. You'd have help support family around you. And Sophia, you need to think about what's best for the baby, not just your pride. My pride. As if pride was the issue here. We could turn my guest room into a nursery, my mother offered, her voice eager now that she thought she'd found a solution. It's right next to my bedroom, so I'd be close by for nighttime feedings. You could keep working during the day while I watch the baby. It would be perfect. Or the basement apartment at our house, Elena added. It's basically its own space. Bedroom, bathroom, small kitchenette. You'd have privacy, but we'd be upstairs if you needed anything. Marco and I have already discussed it. We want to help. That's very generous, I said carefully, trying to find the right words that wouldn't lead to an explosion before I was ready. But I'm fine where I am. Fine. Elena's voice pitched higher. Sophia, be realistic. You're about to have a baby. Alone. In a 400-square-foot studio apartment. Working a job that barely covers your rent. How is any of that fine? My Aunt Carmen, who'd been quietly observing until now, spoke up. Maybe she has savings we don't know about. Sophia's always been private about her finances. If she had substantial savings, she wouldn't be living in that apartment, Elena countered, as if I wasn't sitting right there. She'd have moved somewhere bigger, somewhere more suitable for a baby. The fact that she's still in that studio tells us everything we need to know about her financial situation. I like my apartment, I said. That's not the point, my mother interjected, reaching over to take my hand. Her grip was tight, urgent. The point is that babies need space. They need resources. They need stability. And Mija, as much as I love you, you don't have those things right now. You don't know what I have, I said quietly. We know you work from home doing logo designs, Elena said. We know you drive a 12-year-old Toyota. We know you shop at discount stores and clip coupons. We know you haven't taken a real vacation in years. Sophia, you don't have to be ashamed. We're your family. We want to help you. My cousin Jessica leaned forward. My sister went through something similar. Single mom, not much money. She moved back in with our parents for 2 years. It was the best decision. She was able to save up, get proper childcare, eventually get her own place. There's no shame in accepting help. Exactly, Elena said, seizing on this. There's no shame in it. In fact, it's the mature, responsible thing to do. Think of the baby, Sophia. Doesn't she deserve to grow up in a stable environment with family support? She deserves to grow up with a mother who makes her own decisions, I said, my voice firmer now. Even when those decisions are wrong? My mother asked, and she looked genuinely distressed. Even when those decisions might hurt your child? You think I'm going to hurt my child? I asked. I think you're going to struggle, my mother said, tears spilling over now. I think you're going to be exhausted and overwhelmed and alone trying to do everything yourself because you're too proud to ask for help. I think you're going to look back in a year and wish you'd let us help you when we offered. Elena pulled out her phone again. I made a budget, she said. A realistic budget for what you'll need for the baby's first year. Formula alone is $150 a month. Diapers are another $80. That's almost $3,000 right there, not counting clothes, medical expenses, toys, equipment. Sophia, I don't think you understand how expensive babies are. I understand perfectly well, I said. Then you understand why we're worried, she pressed. Your freelance work at best brings in what? Maybe $2,000 a month? Maybe $3,000 in a good month? After rent and utilities and food and transportation, there's nothing left. Nothing for the baby. Nothing for emergencies. Nothing for... The door to the private dining room opened. A man in a suit entered the restaurant. He was distinguished looking, probably in his late 50s, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His silver hair was perfectly styled and he carried an expensive leather portfolio. He scanned the room with professional efficiency, his eyes finding me immediately. Ms. Rivera, he said, his voice calm and authoritative. I apologize for the interruption. Every head in the room swiveled to look at him, then back at me. Robert, I said, feeling my face flush. This really isn't. I know this is inconvenient timing, he said, walking directly to where I sat at the head of the table. But you weren't responding to my calls or messages, and these documents require your signature today. The deadline for establishing the trust fund is this afternoon, and if we miss it, we'll have tax complications. He set his leather portfolio on the table in front of me, right next to my half-eaten piece of cake, and opened it with practiced efficiency. I understand you're at a celebration, he continued, pulling out a thick stack of legal documents, but the attorneys are waiting and we need to finalize this before the close of business today. Trust fund, my mother said faintly. Robert either didn't hear her or chose not to acknowledge the question. He was in full professional mode now, pointing to specific sections of the document with a gold pen. Ms. Rivera, your signature for the trust fund, $50 million for your daughter's education, he said, indicating the signature line. This establishes the educational trust as we discussed. The principal amount will be invested in a diversified portfolio with quarterly reviews. Disbursements will begin when she turns 18, with full access at age 25. Every conversation stopped. The room went so silent I could hear the kitchen staff preparing orders in the back. I could hear the faint sound of traffic from the street outside. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. 50. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. 50 million. Robert continued as if she hadn't spoken, flipping to another page in the document. The fund is structured to allow for approximately $2 million per year for undergraduate and graduate education at any institution worldwide, with additional provisions for study abroad, research opportunities, and postgraduate professional development. Any unused funds will remain in the trust and continue to grow. He looked up at me, his expression professional but kind. I know you wanted to ensure she has every educational opportunity, regardless of what career path she chooses. This structure allows for maximum flexibility while ensuring the principal remains protected. He added, "Should I prepare the nursery at your estate or the Manhattan townhouse?" My sister's hand froze over her cake, her fork suspended in midair. "The estate," I said quietly, taking the pen he offered. My hand was steady even though my heart was racing. "The townhouse is too small for the full nursery setup we discussed. We'll use it for overnight stays when I need to be in the city, but I want her primary space to be at the estate where she'll have room to grow." "Excellent choice," Robert said, making a note on his tablet. "The estate's nursery designer has your specifications. Montessori-influenced layout, natural materials, gender-neutral color palette. She'll begin work next week and estimates completion 4 weeks before your due date. That should give you plenty of time for any adjustments." I signed the documents quickly, aware that 35 pairs of eyes were boring into me with an intensity that was almost physical. "Wait," Elena said, finding her voice. Her face had gone pale, and she was gripping the edge of the table like she might fall over. "What estate? What townhouse? Sophia, what is he talking about?" Robert glanced at her, then back at me, his expression questioning. "Should I?" "It's fine," I said, signing the final page. They were going to find out eventually. Might as well be now. "Find out what?" my mother demanded, her voice climbing. "Sophia, who is this man? What trust fund? What estate?" Robert closed the portfolio with a decisive snap. "I'll leave you to your celebration, Ms. Rivera." The estate manager confirmed that the contractors will begin the nursery construction on Monday. "Your property manager also wanted me to remind you that the quarterly inspection of your Queens properties is scheduled for next week. She'll send you the preliminary reports." "Thank you, Robert. I appreciate you bringing these by." He nodded professionally. "Congratulations on the baby. I look forward to meeting her." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Ms. Rivera? Your accountant asked me to remind you that the quarterly estimated tax payment is due next week. Given the capital gains from the Streamview stock sale, it's going to be substantial, approximately $4.7 million. She wanted to make sure you'd transferred sufficient funds to your operating account." With that casual bombshell, he left. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena found her voice first, though it came out as little more than a croak. "Someone needs to explain what just happened. Right now." I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment. My hands were shaking slightly now, not from fear but from the adrenaline of knowing that everything was about to change. "Robert Thornton is my financial advisor," I said calmly. "He's been managing my investment portfolio for the past 9 years. "Your portfolio," my mother repeated, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. "Sophia, what portfolio? What investments?" "My investment portfolio," I said. "Stocks, bonds, real estate holdings, private equity. Robert handles the day-to-day management and provides quarterly reviews. He's very good at what he does." "The trust fund," Aunt Rosa said faintly. "He said $50 million. For the baby's education." "That's correct," I confirmed. It seemed like an appropriate amount. "It will cover any university in the world, multiple graduate degrees if she wants them, study abroad programs, research opportunities, and seed capital if she wants to start a business after graduation. Education is important." $50 million, Elena whispered, still stuck on that number. "You're setting up a $50 million trust fund for your baby." "For her education specifically," I clarified. "It's separate from her other trusts and her inheritance. This fund is purely for educational and early professional development." "Other trusts." My mother's voice was barely audible. "Inheritance? Sophia, what are you talking about?" I realized there was no going back now. No more half-truths or careful omissions. It was time for the whole truth. 11 years ago, I began. When I was 23, I designed a logo for a tech startup. They were just a couple of guys with an idea and no money. They couldn't afford to pay me the $500 I quoted them, so they offered me equity instead. 3% of their company in exchange for the logo and some initial design work. "What startup?" Elena asked, though her voice suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "They called themselves Streamview," I said. "They were trying to create a better video streaming platform. More user-friendly than what existed at the time. Better recommendation algorithms." More creator-friendly monetization. The recognition dawned slowly across the room. StreamView was everywhere now. The third largest streaming platform in the world, behind only Netflix and Amazon. You own part of StreamView? My mother said. 3%, I confirmed. Which sounds small, I know. But StreamView was acquired by MediaTek Global 2 years ago for $47 billion. My 3% was worth $1.4 billion. The words hung in the air like smoke. Billion, Aunt Carmen breathed. With AB. With AB, I agreed. Though I should clarify, I didn't receive the full amount in cash. Part of it was in MediaTek stock, part in cash, part in structured payouts. But yes, after taxes and fees, I netted approximately $892 million liquid, plus about $300 million in MediaTek stock. You could have heard a pin drop in that restaurant. And the estate, Elena said, her voice sounding strangled. The townhouse. Those are real. The estate is in Westchester, I said. 42 acres, main house is about 8,000 square feet, plus a 4-bedroom guest house, pool, stables, tennis court. I bought it 6 years ago for $12 million. It's probably worth around $18 million now. And the Manhattan townhouse? My mother asked. Upper East Side near the Met, I said. 4 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, original architectural details. I bought it 8 years ago for $8.5 million. Current value is probably around $14 million. I use it when I need to be in the city for meetings or events. Meetings, Elena repeated. Events. Board meetings, charity galas, business conferences, I explained. I'm on the board of 3 nonprofits and 2 startup companies. I'm also a silent partner in 6 local businesses, including Rose's Bakery where Mom buys her bread. My mother gasped. Rose's Bakery? You own Rose's Bakery? I'm a 30% partner, I corrected. Rosa was going to close 5 years ago. She couldn't compete with the chains moving into the neighborhood. I provided capital for a renovation and new equipment in exchange for equity. She still runs the day-to-day operations. I just collect a percentage of the profits which I donate to local food banks. Jessica was frantically scrolling on her phone. Oh my God. Sofia Rivera, board member of the Children's Education Fund. That's you. You donated $5 million last year. $5.2 million, I corrected automatically. They do important work. And the Queens properties, Aunt Rosa said slowly. Robert mentioned properties in Queens. Plural. I own 15 residential buildings in Queens and Brooklyn, I said. Total of 127 units. It's part of my diversification strategy. Real estate provides stable income and appreciates reliably over time. The buildings generate about $2.1 million per year in rental income after expenses. Elena was shaking her head slowly, like she couldn't process what she was hearing. The studio apartment. You said you lived in a studio apartment in Queens. I do live in a studio apartment in Queens, I confirmed. The building I own has 6 units. I live in one and rent out the other 5. My unit is 450 square feet. It's perfect for what I need, a quiet space to work without distractions. But you could live anywhere, my mother said. You could live in a mansion. A penthouse. Anything you wanted. I don't want a mansion or a penthouse, I said simply. The studio works fine for me. It's rent-free since I own the building. It's in a neighborhood I like. It's close to good restaurants in the park. Why would I move just because I could afford something bigger? This doesn't make any sense, Elena said, and she looked genuinely distressed now. You drive a 2012 Toyota Camry. I've seen your car. It's 12 years old. It runs perfectly, I said. It's reliable, fuel-efficient, easy to park. I've replaced everything that needs replacing. It's basically mechanically sound. Why would I buy a new car when this one works fine? You shop at discount stores, my mother added as if trying to prove I couldn't possibly have money. I've seen you at Target, at TJ Maxx. You use coupons. Target has good quality basics at reasonable prices, I said. Why would I pay $200 for a maternity dress I'll wear for 3 months when Target sells one for $35 that's just as comfortable? And coupons are free money. Why wouldn't I use them? Because you're a billionaire. Elena practically shouted. Almost billionaire, I corrected. After the MediaTek stock vested and I diversified my holdings, I'm currently worth approximately $1.1 billion. But that's net worth, not liquid cash. Most of it's in investments and real estate. Most of it, Jessica repeated faintly. Oh my God. Most of $1 billion. My cousin Mariana spoke up for the first time. The incomplete breast pump. We gave you an incomplete secondhand breast pump. And you're a billionaire. Almost billionaire, I said again. And I appreciate the breast pump. The baby won't care if it's new or used as long as it works. Though I should probably order those missing parts you mentioned. Why? My mother asked, and her voice was breaking. Why would you hide all this from us? Why let us think you were struggling? Why let us worry about you? Because the moment you knew about the money, everything would change, I said quietly. You'd stop seeing me as Sophia, your daughter and sister. You'd start seeing me as Sophia the billionaire. Every conversation would be filtered through that knowledge. Every interaction would be colored by it. We wouldn't, Elena started. You already are, I interrupted gently. Look at yourselves right now. You're not seeing your sister who's 8 months pregnant and about to become a mother. You're seeing dollar signs. You're recalculating every interaction we've ever had. You're feeling embarrassed about the gifts you brought. You're wondering why I didn't tell you sooner. I looked around the table at all of them. My mother, my sister, my aunts and cousins and family friends. Women who'd known me my entire life, who'd celebrated my birthdays and graduations and now my baby shower. I didn't hide the money, I said. I just didn't announce it. There's a difference. And I had good reasons. What reasons? Elena demanded. What possible reason could you have for letting your family think you were broke? Because money changes everything, I said simply. When I first made money from Streamview, I was 23. I told a few college friends. Within 3 months, 2 of them had asked for loans that we both knew would never be repaid. A distant relative I'd met twice at family weddings suddenly wanted to reconnect and asked if I'd invest in his guaranteed business opportunity. A guy I'd been on 2 dates with proposed. The money changed every relationship I had. So you lied to your family? My mother asked, and she sounded hurt. I didn't lie, I corrected. I told you I did graphic design work. I do. I still take on interesting projects. I told you I was careful with money. I am. I told you I was fine. I am. I just didn't specify the scale of my business or the extent of my assets. You filled in the blanks with your own assumptions and I didn't correct them. That's the same as lying, Elena insisted. Is it? I challenged. If I'd been a teacher making $55,000 a year, would you have needed to know my exact salary? If I'd been a nurse or an accountant or anything else, would you have demanded to see my tax returns? No. You would have accepted my general explanation of my work and moved on. The only reason my privacy bothers you is because the numbers are bigger than you expected. The numbers are astronomically bigger, Jessica muttered. Which is exactly why I didn't share them, I said. Because once you know someone has significant wealth, that's all you see. You stop seeing the person and start seeing the money. Every holiday gift becomes a calculation. Every family gathering becomes an opportunity to ask for help. Every conversation becomes tainted with the knowledge of financial inequality. My mother was crying now. But we're your family. You should have trusted us. Should I have? I asked gently. Mom, 3 years ago you asked to borrow $3,000 for a new roof. You said you'd pay me back in 6 months. I gave you the money, which you never repaid, by the way, not that I expected you to. But if you'd known I had hundreds of millions of dollars, would you have asked for $3,000? Or would you have asked for more? Would you have felt comfortable asking for help with other things? Where does it stop? She opened her mouth, then closed it. And Elena, I continued, turning to my sister. 2 years ago you and Marco were looking at investment properties. You mentioned you needed a $50,000 down payment and were trying to save up. I could have written you a check on the spot. But if I had, would you have felt indebted? Would you have felt like you owed me? Would our relationship have changed from sisters to creditor and debtor? Elena's face flushed. I would have paid you back. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. But either way, the money would have been between us. A thing we had to navigate around. I didn't want that. So instead you let us patronize you, she said, and her voice was bitter now. You let us give you used baby things and budget advice. You sat here while I gave you a presentation about the cost of raising a child, knowing the whole time that you could buy this entire restaurant and not notice the expense. I let you care about me, I corrected softly. Elena, those gifts you all brought, they were given with love. They represent this community coming together to support someone they care about. That's not something to be ashamed of. The only reason you're embarrassed now is because you're putting money above the intention behind the gifts. But we looked like idiots, she insisted. To whom? I asked. To me? I don't think you looked like idiots. I think you looked like people who care about your family and want to help. That's admirable, not idiotic. My Aunt Carmen spoke up, her voice thoughtful. 5 years ago, the community center. We were going to lose it because we couldn't make the mortgage payment. An anonymous donor paid off the entire $180,000 mortgage. That was you, wasn't it? I nodded. And last year, she continued, when my husband needed that experimental treatment that insurance wouldn't cover, someone paid the $95,000 bill. That was you too. Yes. And 3 years ago when Jessica's daughter needed. Yes, I said, cutting her off. I've helped when I could, where I could. Quietly. Anonymously when possible. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I could help and it needed doing. That's what family does. But you didn't tell us, my mother said, still struggling with this. You helped us without telling us it was you. Would you have accepted the help if you'd known? I asked. Or would you have felt obligated? Would you have spent the last 5 years feeling like you owed me something? I didn't want gratitude or recognition. I just wanted to help. The table was silent as they processed this. Finally, my mother spoke. The baby shower. Today. We planned this whole thing around the assumption that you couldn't afford things. We brought you second-hand items and budget advice. And you just let us. You were trying to help someone you love, I said. That's never something to regret. Mom, the fact that you wanted to support me, that you organized this whole celebration, that you brought gifts even though you thought I couldn't reciprocate, that says everything about who you are. Be proud of that. But everything's different now, Elena said, and she sounded lost. How are we supposed to interact with you knowing this? The same way you did yesterday, I said. I'm the same person I was an hour ago. I'm still your sister who calls you every Sunday, who comes to family dinners, who listens to you complain about Marco leaving dishes in the sink. The only thing that's changed is your knowledge of my bank balance. Everything else, everything that actually matters, is exactly the same. But it's not, she insisted. You're a billionaire, Sophia. That changes everything. Does it? I challenged. Does my net worth change the fact that I'm about to become a mother and I'm terrified? Does it change the fact that I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this? Does it change the fact that I'm going to need support and advice and help from people who've been through this before? I looked around the table. Money can buy a lot of things. It can buy estates and townhouses and $50 million trust funds. But it can't buy what I really need right now. Family who loves me, supports me, and will tell me the truth about how hard motherhood is going to be. My mother got up and came around the table, pulling me into a tight hug. I'm sorry, Mija. For not seeing you. For making assumptions. For treating you like you needed saving. You were being a mother, I said into her shoulder. Mothers worry. It's in your job description. But I should have asked more questions, she said. Should have listened better. Should have trusted that you knew what you were doing with your life. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But you're here now learning. That's what matters. Elena joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of us. I'm sorry too. For being condescending. For acting like I knew better. For the presentation about baby expenses. God, that presentation. I'm never going to live that down. Probably not, I agreed, and we all laughed through tears. The baby shower gradually returned to something resembling normalcy, though the atmosphere was fundamentally different. People asked real questions now, about my work, my plans, my life. About the estate and the townhouse and what it was like to manage a real estate portfolio. And I answered honestly, no longer hiding behind vague responses. When the party was winding down and guests were saying their goodbyes, my mother pulled me aside. The estate in Westchester, she said. Is there room for visitors? There's a 4-bedroom guest house, I said with a smile. Fully furnished, beautifully decorated. You can visit whenever you want. Stay as long as you want. Be as involved in your granddaughter's life as you want. Your granddaughter, she repeated softly. I'm going to be a grandmother to a baby whose education is already funded to the tune of $50 million. You're going to be a grandmother to a baby who's going to need her abuela, I corrected. The money is just details. The important part is the relationship. Elena was packing up the gifts, all of them I noticed, including the second-hand ones. I'm still bringing the used baby monitor, she announced. And the bouncer. You said yourself the baby won't care if they're new. Bring them, I agreed. I'll use them. Well, maybe not the incomplete breast pump. I should probably get one with all the parts. Let me buy you a new breast pump, she said immediately. The best one. The top of the line. Elena, I interrupted gently. Right, she said, catching herself. Sorry. You'll buy your own breast pump. Because you can afford every breast pump in America. I probably won't buy every breast pump in America, I said. But yes, I'll handle the breast pump. She laughed and it sounded almost normal. This is so weird. It is, I agreed. But we'll figure it out. We're family. That's what family does. That night, back in my studio apartment, my building, I reminded myself, I called Robert. I apologize again for today, he said immediately. That wasn't how I wanted to handle the trust fund paperwork. It's fine, I said. Actually, it's probably better that it happened this way. Rip the Band-Aid off, you know? How did your family take it? About how you'd expect, I said. Shock, confusion, embarrassment, some hurt feelings. But we talked it through. I think we're going to be okay. And how are you feeling? I thought about it, one hand resting on my pregnant belly. Relieved, actually. I didn't realize how much energy it was taking to maintain the fiction. Now I can just be myself. Good, Robert said. You deserve that. And Sophia? Your daughter is lucky. She's going to have a mother who knows the difference between what's valuable and what's valuable. What's expensive, you mean? I said what I meant, he replied. Value and expense aren't the same thing. You've always known that. Your family is learning it now. After we hung up, I sat in my 450 square foot studio and looked around. The space was small but comfortable. A Murphy bed that folded up during the day. A desk where I still did design work occasionally. A small kitchen where I made coffee every morning. Not much by anyone's standards. But it was mine. It had been enough when I had nothing, and it was still enough now that I had everything. Tomorrow I'd start preparing to move to the estate. I'd finalize the nursery plans with the designer Robert had mentioned. I'd coordinate with my property manager about getting the guest house ready for family visits. But tonight I sat in my studio, my first property, the place where I'd started building my empire, and felt grateful for the journey that had brought me here. And for a family that, despite their flaws and assumptions and misguided attempts to help, genuinely loved me. Even when they hadn't known who I really was. Especially now that they did. Because in the end that was what mattered. Not the money or the estates or the trust funds. But the people who loved you for who you were, not what you had. And I was lucky enough to have both.